Hello and thank you for downloading the Witness History podcast from the BBC World Service with me, Andrew Whitehead. Today I'm taking you back to 1947 and the story of how Kashmir came to be split between India and Pakistan.
The Kashmiri cauldron still simmers, and grim scenes reminiscent of larger-scale warfare are despoiling the face of the fair land.
In October 1947, tribesmen from the frontier regions of Pakistan and Afghanistan invaded the Kashmir Valley. Truckloads of well-armed but undisciplined fighters headed for Baramulla, a strategically important town at the head of the valley. There they attacked a Catholic mission and hospital.
St. Joseph's Convent suffers the same wanton destruction as other buildings at Baramulla. The marauding tribesmen recognize no rules of warfare but their own.
Horrible fellows were coming over the wall. That's what I remember. Big beards and guns. From someone whom they killed, they would take their wristwatches. They were real thieves and murderers.
In 2003, I travelled to Kashmir to investigate the events of 1947 for the BBC. Among the survivors were Angela Aranya and Tom Dykes. They were young children when the attack on St. Joseph's Convent happened. Angela's mother was the doctor. Tom came from a British Army family and his mother had come to have another baby.
I could actually see the splinters start to fly across the room, and I could see the wild faces through the cracks in the door. The nuns huddled in the corner, obviously petrified. I do remember seeing one or two of them later, and they were staggering around the place with their habits torn. Maybe they were raped, but I certainly don't know if that did happen.
Any adult person, they just stabbed or shot, and they actually attacked people in their beds.
The invaders also wreaked havoc in Baramulla itself. The Balis were a leading Sikh family in the town. Their community was a particular target of the tribesmen.
There was a big panic in the town. Everyone was running. We had only one word: run for life.
In the middle of all this, they were taking away youngsters, young women, taking them to other villages. They took my cousins away right in front of me. There were 3 sisters and they took all 3 of them. To this day, we don't know anything about them.
The invasion came 2 months after the British had withdrawn from India. 3 in 4 of the people of Kashmir were Muslims. They were ruled by a Hindu Maharaja. He'd been dithering over whether to throw in his lot with Hindu-majority India or the new Muslim state of Pakistan. His son, Karan Singh, was then the Crown Prince.
After 15th of August 1947, theoretically, my father had become independent because he had not acceded either to India or to Pakistan. And he wanted to sign standstill agreements with both the countries. And while this whole thing was still on, the invasion was unleashed.
The tribesmen invaded in the name of Islam and of Pakistan. They caught the Maharaja by surprise as he attended a festival. His son had stayed behind in a palace in Kashmir's capital, Srinagar.
There was a darbar going on, this very big ceremonial where my father sat on the golden throne and everybody paid homage. And everybody was out of the palace and suddenly all the lights went off. And it was really a very eerie, sort of weird moment.
And the lights went off, why?
Because the raiders had captured the powerhouse in Mahura, which is on the Srinagar-Udi road.
So how far away was that?
30-35 miles.
The invasion pushed the Maharaja into opting for India. He signed a letter of accession to Delhi, requested Indian military help, and fled in a convoy of vehicles to the city of Jammu.
It was a terrible journey. By the time we left, it was dark. My father was very disturbed and very depressed at what was happening, obviously. He didn't say a word in the whole drive. And when he reached Jammu, he simply got out and said, "We've lost Kashmir."
The people at St. Joseph's Convent didn't have the choice of fleeing. The tribesmen stormed over the walls, started looting and manhandled the nuns. Within minutes, 6 people were dead or dying. A nun, a nurse, a patient, the husband of the hospital doctor, and the British Army couple, the Dykes. So, sister, you've taken us to a place at the back of the convent.
Yes.
It's an orchard, really, isn't it?
Those who have been died in 1947, they have been buried here.
Simple gravestones, painted white, the paint slightly peeling now. And one of the graves is an official war grave for Lieutenant Colonel D.O.T. Dykes of the Sikh Regiment. And then at the far end of this very small cemetery area, the grave of Mrs. Dykes, buried 2 or 3 places away from her husband because apparently her body wasn't discovered for a couple of days.
We went out to look for my parents. The shooting had stopped by this time. We found a pile of bloodied bodies, and on these bodies was my brother Douglas, howling his eyes out. Then I can remember a young girl coming up to me, and she told me that my parents had been shot.
That young girl was Angela Aranya.
They got all the nuns out. My father was there, was trying to get them away from the nuns and my mother, when they got infuriated at the sight of him. So they told him, go towards that tree. As he was walking towards there, he said, have mercy. I have a child, I have my wife over here. But they had no mercy, and the nuns were also pleading for his life, but they shot him.
After a 10-day siege, Indian troops relieved the convent in Baramulla and repulsed the invaders from the town.
The single landing strip at Srinagar can scarcely handle such heavy traffic. A constant stream of aircraft bringing more and more Sikh warriors to complete...
Indian forces took the whole Kashmir Valley, but some other parts of the princely state came under Pakistan's control. Within months, India and Pakistan were at war over Kashmir. The former princely state was torn in two, as it still is. That raises the cloudy question of the extent to which Pakistan was behind the tribal invasion. Karan Singh takes the Indian line.
It was a Pakistan-inspired and financed invasion, and these tribesmen with, as we later learnt, plainclothes Pakistani soldiers and officers were let in to sort of take Kashmir. There's no two opinions about that, is there?
It went badly wrong for Pakistan then, didn't it?
Yes, it did go wrong. What it succeeded in doing was to force my father more or less to accede to India.
All allegations of this being manipulated by the government of Pakistan were historically wrong.
Sardar Abdul Qayyum Khan, a prominent Kashmiri Muslim leader, has a different view. Earlier in 1947, he'd started his own insurgency against the Maharaja. He says the tribal invasion actually ruined his plans.
In August 47, we started this armed revolt. At that time, it was the state army fighting the state people. But gradually, the people from frontier also started moving in. The whole plan was thwarted. It was not being coordinated because of the intervention of these tribes. They would have reached Srinagar airport without any obstruction. Because of that indiscipline, no command from behind, no control, they went on looting, and when they were full, they went back.
The Maharaja's son agrees with that last point. He says if the tribesmen had not delayed by a few days to loot Baramulla, pro-Pakistani fighters would have reached Srinagar, and Kashmir's history might have been very different.
It was touch and go. The Indian Air Force started flying in when the raiders were almost within 4 or 5 miles of the airport, perhaps even closer. And it was really touch and go.
Since 1947, India and Pakistan have fought 3 wars in which Kashmir has been a factor. For the past 30 years, the Kashmir Valley has endured a bitter anti-India insurgency. The fault line exposed in 1947 has not been healed. That edition of Witness History was written and presented by me, Andrew Whitehead. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.